let's go in to showing you how to create catch lights in the real world by using different elements. And I'm going to show you examples of me shooting across the country of where you can find shade and create a catch light. Okay, so here's some ways to find shade. Number one, and what we think of the most, trees. Trees and coverage can create shade, and as long as you can find a nice tree with some good shade, you can find a catch light. A lot of times you can find shade what? With walls, in between walls, next to a wall, buildings, anything with a large wall can create shade and a great area for you to take a portrait. Overhangs. Now they could be many different kind of overhangs. Maybe it's a freeway overway, or maybe it's a bridge, or maybe it's a pier. There's different things that you can use to create shade, and overhang is a great way to do it. Archways or large openings you can find in your environment. And here's one source that you didn't think of that could actually be eye-opening for you in regards to creating a great portrait, and that is low sun. The lower the sun, the more shade that it creates. First of all, when the sun is high, it's lighting up the ground. And so that's eliminating a lot of the shade on the ground. But as that sun goes lower, it makes more shade on the ground, and therefore more opportunities for you to take a great shot with catch lights. And I'm going to show you examples of that. Let's look at trees, right? So here I am in Hawaii shooting in this awesome location, and I find this beam of light coming down in between the trees. So I tell my subject to go over there and what? Nose towards the light. She looks up towards the light. I do a yin-yang pose, and boom, I got a beautiful portrait. And all she's doing is looking up towards that light, and I'm finding a little bright spot amongst those trees. This next photo is rare because it was only one of the few times in my career where I woke up before the sunrise to get a shot. But as you can see here on the beaches of Hawaii, it was totally worth it. And look at that sky and that sunrise and the colors. And I had this beautiful light coming in. I put her under that tree where there was some shaded area, but that low sunlight was able to come right in, giving me some beautiful highlight and shadow. And there's a catch light in her eye also. This technique can help you when you're shooting in the most difficult situations. I am shooting in a very, very bright light situation when the sun is really high in the sky, creating very nasty shadows. So what did I have to do to get rid of that was what? Find a tree, creating some amazing shade. So I put my subject under the tree. She was looking out into the bright sky, creating an amazing catch light. So what I'm going to do on this next picture, I'm going to zoom in real close so you can see her eye and what exactly created that catch light. So you can see clearly, first of all, me, and you can see that blue sky in front of her creating that catch light. You can see the sand, and you can see the ocean, and you can see the sky, all lit by the sun, creating that catch light in her eye. But that catch light is only seen because I have her in a darker area. By putting her in the shade, that sky and sand became a lot brighter light source to create that catch light. Now, use this technique when you're in bright light and you're looking for a great place to take a portrait look for shade. Now you're going to see these next photos where it's going to be completely covered by trees and foliage, and you're going to see little beams of light coming in. And this next photo here where I have this gorgeous subject sitting on the rocks, and I placed her exactly where that sun was shining through the trees, giving me a great directional light. You can get clues of where this light is coming from by looking at the shadows. So if you look at this lovely subject wearing the green dress, you can see the highlight in the shadows, and you can figure out where the source of that light was. So look at her legs. You can see a highlight in shadow, so you know that light is from above. So where do I have her place her nose? Up towards the light. Now you can see the beautiful highlight and shadow on her face, because on the short side, you can see a short side shadow. What is the short side? The short side is the part of the face that's closest to the camera. So that's why they refer to that as a short side shadow. Now the next photo is also kind of in overcast weather, but still, even in overcast, the light is coming from above. Look at the shadows on her dress, and you can kind of figure out where this lighting is from. You can see a shadow under her neck. So what do? Is I have her raise her chin a bit to let that light come in. A lot of times when you're shooting in overcast, you think it's even lighting, but there's actually a fair amount of light coming from the top, and it will create raccoon eyes or shadows in the eyes if you're not careful. So if you lift the face up towards the light, you can let that light into those deeper eye sockets to take out those shadows in the eyes. Even on an overcast day, that's necessary to do that. I love this next shot of this Hawaiian dancer on top of the rocks with the water coming down. And this shot, when she started dancing, it was very difficult because the sun, there was some strong sun coming from the top, creating shadows on her body. So I had to pose her in a way where there wasn't any shadow on her face, which was what? Nose towards the light. And so she did a dance move so she can look in that direction so I wouldn't get any shadows on her face. But I was just looking for that little bright spot coming down through the trees, creating an amazing shot. All of these shots were taken in midday when the sun was the strongest. But if you go into an area that's heavily covered by trees and foliage, you can find some amazing shots even in bright light. Now you might say, well, I am not in Hawaii all the time with this amazing waterfalls and foliage and trees. Well, how can I do this, Scott? Well, here I am shooting a wedding in good old Pasadena, California. And they had some trees and some buildings creating shade. And I love this shot because there's a duality to the light. So you can see a nice subtle rim light around their hair. So that light is coming from behind them to give the subjects a nice little rim light to separate them from the background. But where are they looking? They are looking in a clearing. There's an opening that the trees had where they could get access to some bright sky. And I am going to play this next slide, and I'm going to show you the eyes of the bride and exactly where she's looking at. So look at that photo and her eyes. You can literally see the trees and the open sky in between those trees. That's what created the catch light. I love this duality of getting two forms of light by just using the one light source, by putting your subjects in the shade, having some backlight, and using the sky as your main source of light to create a catch light. Here is another beautiful couple in this next photo. And I found a tree where there was plenty of shade, and I had the bride look into the bright sky to create that catch light. I'm going to take a close-up of her eye so you can definitely see that the sky created the catch light. So you can see that photo there, and you can see the horizon, and you can see the sky in plain view creating that catch light.